Cohort 1 is for enrollees or physician anesthesiologists who have been working in a surgery center and or an office-based facility where the breadth and depth of cases they have been doing for some time were clinically narrow in scope. So an example of that would be endoscopy centers, cataract centers, maybe podiatry offices where, you would tend to do the same thing or same cases time and time again, over and over again. And you've been doing that for a lot of years. So your ability to walk into a hospital or a more complex surgery center and undertake cases that were more sophisticated on patients that had more significant comorbidities might be a little bit tough. And an example, like in a real life example, is, we had a doctor who came into the program and they had been working for 20 years with a chronic pain doctor. And the chronic pain doctor would do the procedures, and this physician anesthesiologist would give the sedation. And the sedation was very mild. It was maybe a milligram or two of Versed and maybe a little bit of fentanyl, but they were so light. And that, after 20 years, this person they really didn't know or remember a lot of the things that they had known prior to entering this more restrictive practice environment. So Cohort 1, really the challenge is to bring them up to speed in terms of their didactic knowledge, but also their clinical capabilities to close gaps in both didactic and clinical capabilities, commensurate oftentimes with just, how limited the environment they come from had been. So the physicians in ARRP that fall into Cohort 2 are people that really took a time away completely from medicine. They might, for instance, have had an issue with a family member or themselves, an illness, an injury. They might have had personal family problems. Some of them might have decided to go into business or do something else with their life, and now have decided to come back into their anesthesiology. And, a real life, example of that. We had a couple examples. One, we had a anesthesiologist that was serving as chief quality officer for a company. And he had been doing that for 20 years. And he decided he wanted to get back into the operating room. So very wise, very thoughtful, very accomplished doctor here who just hadn't been doing anesthesiology. And, he came into the program and flourished, frankly. We had another anesthesiologist who, unfortunately, their kid got really sick and they needed to take time off. And it was an extended period of time they took off. And they wanted to come back. And sometimes the problem with those sorts of situations is, you take a step away and you feel a little uncomfortable, but if you came back in, you might feel, more comfortable, but you don't, and you don't power through it. And then before you know it, you've been out multiple years, sometimes multiple decades, and it's more difficult to come back. And a program like this is required. So the ARRP Cohort 3 anesthesiologists, they have more significant issues that they've had in their career. I guess you could say the bumps in the road were more, significant, both in terms of the seriousness and in terms of their impact on their career. And some examples of Cohort 3 are clinicians that may have had an issue with the law, like for instance, a DWI. They may have had an issue with narcotics, either self-prescribing or prescribing um, to in a manner that wasn't in keeping with state law. They might have had an issue with alcohol. They could have had a situation where they were even in jail, maybe for not paying child support or for some other transgression. Those are all pretty good examples of what cohort 3 anesthesiologists are like. Some real life examples, we had an anesthesiologist that unfortunately um, had an issue with they got a DWI. And even though that DWI was dismissed in court, um, they didn't notify the state where they were licensed in that had happened. So again, the DWI got dismissed. The judge said, no, you didn't have a DWI, but they didn't report it to the state they were licensed in. So they actually got disciplined. They were had their license taken away for a while, and it became a huge battle to get it back for them. And that's a really good example of that. We had somebody else that they happened to be a very capable cardiac anesthesiologist. They did transplant cardiac surgeries, and the person had a bad knee, and their knee was in terrible shape, and a cadaver heart came in, and they were the only person available, and they were in too much pain, and they self-medicated with a narcotic. Their heart was in the right place. They were trying to get in and take care of the patient. But those things just are not acceptable. And unfortunately, somebody found out that he had done that, and he had done the right thing and admitted that he had done that. And as you might imagine, this led him to a lengthy journey, which ultimately led to him having issues with his DEA and his state license. So that's another example. Now, it's important to know that almost always cohort 3 clinicians also fall into one of the other cohorts, right? They could fall into cohort 1, they could fall into cohort 2, or they might fall into cohort 4 that is a cohort where people have not been able to pass or keep their board certification. The ARRP program cohort 4 anesthesiologists are anesthesiologists that have had a problem keeping or maintaining their boards. And this cohort is very interesting because many of these anesthesiologists have been practicing day in and day out for years, sometimes decades. And now there's a bylaws change, and wouldn't you know it, they can't continue to work in the hospital that they've been working in for all these years, which is unfortunate, but it sort of is what it is. And, that's how they end up applying to and entering our program. What makes them unique, in a sense, is unlike all the other cohorts where, the clinical supervision and getting off the clinical rust is important, and necessary and indicated. Here with cohort 4, some of these people are clinically spot on, and they're really good clinically. So in this case, really what they need is an environment that is supportive and helpful of their desire to go through the boards process, which if you need to go from scratch, you have to go back and you have to pass your basic exam. You have to then pass your advanced exam. Then you have to get through your applied exam, which has both a simulation and an oral boards component to it. So until you go through those 3 phases and 4 steps, you cannot get board certified. and you have to go in order, and you have to achieve success on each one of them. So as you might imagine, this could be a somewhat longer than shorter journey for people in the program. And they might appear to be somewhat paradoxical because they're the people that are clinically sometimes superb, um, and have broad and deep skills, but you would expect them to have the least time in the program. But because of their unique board certification issue, and the journey it takes to get it, they could end up being in the program longer than others. So, that is an overview of cohort 4, and some examples. Two of them come to mind. I had one physician anesthesiologist who said, "You know what? I came out of training and I just started work, and it was tough. I worked hard and long. I never had time to study. And by the time I switched jobs and I'd started to get a little bit of time to study, some years had gone by, and that knowledge that I had acquired sort of wasn't there anymore. And I unfortunately was not able to pass my advanced exam. And once a significant amount of time has passed, you have to go back to ground zero and start with your basic exam again. So that person actually needed to come back and go into the program and really start with the basic exam preparations. Another example, might be somebody who, was just, not able to pass it. It wasn't that they forgot. It wasn't that they waited too long. It was that they've tried multiple times and haven't been able to pass it. And in that instance, we really try to help that clinician, in particular, try to get them to speak with members of the team who are learning specialists and test taking specialists to help them pass a test. Because ultimately, with this cohort 4, you have to have the requisite knowledge and competencies, but then you have to be able to take a test. So we try to engage these people in those in those activities while they're in the program. In summary, and in high level, the ARRP program has 4 cohorts. Cohort 1 are for anesthesiologists that have been functioning in a clinically restricted environment. And by that, I mean mostly doing almost all endoscopies or cataracts all day. And now their hospital skills have become rusty. Cohort 2 are people that have taken time away from medicine and anesthesia for a prolonged time and now need to come back. Cohort 3 are people that have had issues with their licensed DEA or the law. And cohort 4 are for people that have not been able to pass their boards and need a more structured environment. Those 4 cohorts oftentimes are not unique, and there's sometimes they're not mutually exclusive to one another. So somebody could fall into more than one cohort as well. And when that happens, we approach them in that manner, and the methods and procedures that we put in place to help them really bear in mind the two or more cohorts they fall into. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast here. We do hope you'll go back and listen to other ones we've put together, and sign up to continue to listen to ones that come out after this one. And we're very grateful for your having decided to take some time out of your day to get to know a little bit about the anesthesiology remediation and reentry program, and get to know a little bit about the types of anesthesiologists that come into the program, and some examples. Have a good rest of your day. To learn more, please visit ARRP.us. That's www.arrp.us. Thank you.